All right, hey Vibrant, what is the greatest gift that you have ever received in your life? What's the greatest gift that you have ever received?
A car.
A car. All right, a dog. Okay. Hey, I'm talking about, there's something cool that you get from a gift, but maybe for you guys, maybe it's a moment with your parents that they surprised you with something that you just didn't expect, right? Maybe it's something you've been asking for forever. Or maybe it's when someone showed up for you when you were going through some stuff, right? Or maybe it's a gift for you that meant so much that it cost a lot for that person. When I was younger, I remember a moment that stuck with me. So when I was about like 6 or 7 years old, not really, but more like 8 or 9, okay? I liked to play basketball. I grew up in the 90s, right? So Chicago Bulls, right? Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, I was a huge fan of that. In my room, I had like this little basketball hoop they put on the door frame, right? And I would do my slam dunking and do my shots and do alley-oops and off the backboard. Any of you guys ever had those, like a basketball rim in your bedroom, right? Yeah. A couple of you guys, my parents knew that I love basketball. I was terrible at it, right? Never really went far beyond my bedroom. But one Christmas, I really wanted a basketball hoop to do outside. We had this little cul-de-sac. It's where we lived at the time, so it was like perfect for like pick up basketball with neighbors and my friends. And so I talked about it constantly with my mom, my stepdad. And then I'm sure they were probably just exhausted hearing about this. Like just barking their ear off so much about this. But when Christmas morning came, I opened up all my gifts, and what I wanted was not there, right? This basketball hoop would have came in like a big box back then, right? I tried to hide, you try to hide something like you're happy, but you're like also disappointed, like you just fake a account, right? You don't want to disappoint your parents, right? That was me, right? This is like, no, I wanted to thank you. And then there's a moment that came that Christmas morning where my mom said, wait, there's more, right? She opened up this back room, and in the back room was the basketball hoop, semi-constructed, right? We couldn't construct it fully in the house because there's no way to get it out, right? So it was there. But later what I found out from my mom is that they sacrificed to get this basketball. Like I didn't grow up like great trained like that, right? My mom worked 2 or 3 jobs. My stepdad was working his jobs as well, but he didn't make much. They had gone without something that they wanted so that I could have this gift for Christmas. And suddenly to me, that gift meant so much more. That basketball hoop that I got to play outside with my friends for like 10 plus years, right, meant so much more to me. And tonight we're talking about the greatest gift ever given to you. Not a phone, not a car, not something that's been wrapped under the tree or you were given at your birthday. No. The greatest gift that's ever been given to you is Jesus and what he did on the cross. That he gave his life for you. Guys, when you truly understand this, it changes you. And here's the truth. If you're taking notes, I want you to remember this. If you don't remember anything tonight, I want you to remember this. Right? The greatest generosity isn't a gift we give, but it's a gift that we receive. Because Jesus gave his life so that you can have life. And we're going to look at one of those famous verses of all time, right? Is John 3:16. How many of you guys have known this verse or pretty much like seen this verse maybe 1,000 times, right? For God says this, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. I want you to notice this word. He gave. Throw it up there. He gave his one and only Son. God didn't send a motivational speaker. Right? He didn't send, hey, here's a rule book. Right? You must follow this in order to get to heaven. He didn't send someone to give you really good life advice. No, he gave his Son. That's generosity. I want to tell you a quick story. Because when we look at this, at Jesus, what he did, he gave everything. Right? And there's a friend of mine in high school, his name is Jeff, who always was the one that should show up for people. Do you guys have a friend like that who just shows up for someone, no matter the situation? He was my friend that did that. Like, if you were having a rough day, like, he would sit down with you at lunch. Like, if you needed help maybe moving some stuff, like, he would come over to your house in a heartbeat and help move boxes. Right? If you needed some encouragement, he would give you a phone call, because text messages back then were 10 cents a text. Right? They weren't free like they are today. Right? So if you went over that limit, he would call you to give you some encouragement. And one day I just asked him, Jim, why are you always doing stuff for people? He said something, I'll never forget. He said this, that because someone did it for me when I did it. He had gone through a really dark season in his life, and someone had stepped in and loved him when he was broken. And it changed him. Jesus didn't love us when we had it all together. He loved us in our brokenness. I mean, I really think about what Jesus left behind to comfort you. Right? He left perfect heaven. He left perfect glory in heaven. Right? He had perfect peace, and he's stepping into chaos for you and for me. He's stepping into a broken world that is hurting. He walked dusty roads. He washed poopy feet of his disciples that we talked about last week. He was there when people misunderstood him, when his friends gave up on him. He was mocked. He was beaten. His back was ripped apart because of the whipping and the lashing that he received. And he was nailed to the cross. Why? Because generosity isn't measured by what you give when it's easy. It's measured by what you give when it costs you everything. A couple weeks ago, Jack gave a good message on, the widow's offering, where the rich people gave plenty, gave a lot, but they still had a lot left. Right? But the widow gave 2 coins, gave everything that she had. And Jesus said, that's a person who's giving costly. And Jesus gave everything as well. 1 John 3:16, it says this. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. He laid down his life for you. This is how we love. Not just by our words, not by our feelings, but by the cross. That's how we love. There's a story that I was reading a book by Max Lucado. It's called Grace. And he shared this story about a guy called Lee Nailing. Let's show that photo of Lee. That's Lee. It's an old photo. He's 8 years old in 1926. It's a long time ago. Okay? Not that old. Right? It's old then. Right? And he was 8 years old in 1926. And Lee, in that year, 1926, during the Great Depression, his mom died. His dad lost his job. And eventually, because of that, he and his brothers were placed in an orphanage. And when we'll see that something came out of that 2 years later, they were put on something called the orphan train. Connor, let's go to the next slide. What's this? The orphan train, these trains would carry kids across the country to find families. Now, this was before the modern day CYS or CPS that we have today. But here's the heartbreak. Like it would, when the train stopped in the towns, right, all across the country, the kids would be lined up. Families would come by, they'd walk by, and they'd choose the kid as far as which one they want. Imagine being 8 years old, standing in line, strangers deciding if you're worth taking home. That was Lee. But before Lee left for the train, his father gave him something. It was a pink envelope, right, with his dad's name on it and the address that he's currently living at. And his father said to him before he go aboard the train, he said, "Write me when you get settled. Write me when you find security, when you find a family." For Lee, that envelope meant hope that one day he would return to his father, at least be able to connect with his father later in life. But during that train ride, something devastating happened to Lee. That pink envelope. Right? A worker on the train took the envelope away. She believed that the children needed a clean break from their past. That one connection that Lee had to his father, gone. And that moment was one of those heartbreaking moments that happened, right? Even this, when they would come to a stop, a couple would line Lee's brothers up and himself, and one couple chose Lee's brother, but not Lee. Right? And as the little brothers were being carried away, he'd scream, "Brother, brother!" Lee wanted to run after him, but he couldn't. He couldn't leave him alone. And his brother disappeared. Later, Lee and another brother would be chosen by an older couple. But 3 days later, one of them would be returned. They said they could only keep one. They kept the younger brother, and Lee was now back on this train again. I want you to think about that moment. What he's kind of going through, lost his letter, losing his brothers. Now he's standing in line again, watching people walk past him. Some kids get picked, some don't. Some get families, some on to the next stop. And every time someone walks past, you're wondering the same thing. What's wrong with me? Am I not good enough? Am I not wanted? Am I not worth choosing? And if we're honest, I think a lot of us feel that way about God. Maybe not out loud in how we verbalize, but maybe deep inside our hearts and our soul. You look at your life, you look at the mistakes you made, you look at the struggles that you had, and maybe you quietly wonder this question: would God actually choose someone like me? Jesus, he flips this entire story upside down. Because God isn't walking down the line looking for perfect kids. No, he's looking for the broken ones, the ones that need families. He's looking for the anxious ones. He's looking for the ones that are dealing with shame. The ones who feel forgotten or left out. And through the cross, he's saying, I choose you. It changes everything. Not because you've earned it, but because he's saying, I love you. Friends, when we give because Jesus gave as well. Right? When you understand the kind of love that Jesus is extending to you and to me, it changes you. When you realize that Jesus gave everything for you, you start living differently. You start to forgive faster. You start to care for people deeper. You notice that lonely person at school and you want to give them hope. Why? Because the generosity that you receive flows now through you. When you understand how much Jesus gave, you can't help but give too. Some of you need to hear this tonight. Jesus didn't come for perfect people. He came for broken people. He You who is struggling with anxiety. You who is battling depression. You who is hiding shame for maybe something that you did or happened. You who are wondering if you're good enough. Friends, that the cross answers that question. Forever. You are worth dying for. Jesus, who we're going to celebrate on Easter, is that he didn't stay in the grave. He rose again so that you can have new life, that you can have forgiveness, that you can have freedom from bondage of sin, a fresh start. And tonight we're going to do something powerful. On the sides here we have 2 canvases. I want to invite our leaders to come up. Natalie, come over here. Emily, over here. On the canvas, you're gonna write a word. You're gonna answer this question: What did Jesus save you from? I want you to answer that question, whether it be a one word or a short phrase. What did Jesus save you from? Maybe it's your anxiety. Maybe it's your shame. Maybe it's your fear. Maybe he saved you from yourself. Maybe he saved you from your sin or death. Things that many of us carry. But the Bible says when Jesus went to the cross, his blood covered our sin, our shame, and our past. And so tonight, to symbolize that, we're going to take, when we write our word on, there's red paint here. We're going to take that paintbrush and cover up what you wrote. Because the blood of Jesus covers what once defined you does not define you anymore. And as you do that, you're invited to, on your seats, maybe as you go on the floor, is your unhindered commitment cards. I want you to pull out your unhindered commitment cards real quick. Pull it up high. On those cards, as a church, we're going through this generosity initiative, right? Because we believe that we want to see everyone connected to Jesus. And in that card is a question to the right box there. I want you to take a pen and answer that question. I want to live unhindered for Jesus because. Take a moment to fill that out. And I encourage you, as we've kind of gone through this series of how to live generously with open hands and open heart, how can you be generous? We challenged the middle school students this past Sunday how they can do that by serving. And there might not be a box for you to put the serve, but that might be an option for you to write on there that I want to serve. I encourage you to fill that out. In what way can you be generous and model what Jesus did for you? So as you take your time to fill it out, because maybe God's wanting you to forgive someone. Maybe he's calling you to serve, or maybe to give financial, right? Most schools think, like $10 allowance. Hey, if I give $1 a week and I can help connect people to Jesus, I'm all for that. How can you be generous with what God's given you? Maybe for you, the way you can be generous is reaching a friend who does not know about the hope of Jesus Christ. Maybe tonight is the moment that you say yes to the gift that Jesus is giving you right now. As you bring those forward, I want you to put this in. That Jesus gave everything for me. Now I want to live generously for him. So I encourage you guys to fill your cards. When you're ready, you're going to place your cards in the buckets here. And then you can either, if you're on this side, or you go here, do the canvas. If you're on this side, you go here as well. So when you're ready, you can drop the cards in the bucket and then come to the activity. Lee eventually found a farm in Texas. He arrived at a home to a tall man and a short, plump woman, Mr. and Mrs. Nail. That first evening, as he got there, he sat down at supper with them. They didn't say much. Actually, he probably didn't say anything at all. He just kept his head down, ate quietly. And when that meal was over, he went to bed. He was planning to run away. Because when your life has been full of people leaving, you learn not to get comfortable. But then next morning, something happened that Lee never expected. He sat down at the breakfast table, biscuits and gravy, good Southern breakfast, sitting in front of him. Lee goes to grab one, and Mrs. Dealing, she gently taps it. Said, "Not until we say grace." Lee froze in that moment. He watched as she bowed her head and softly began to pray, "Our Father." See, Lee knew that prayer. He heard that prayer in the orphanage. "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be his name." But something felt different in this moment for Lee. She wasn't just repeating words, right? She was talking to God like he was there at the table with them. She thanked him for the food. She thanked him for the beautiful day. And she said something that made Lee just kind of like lift his head up. She said, "Lord, thank you for the privilege of raising a son." And Lee just stared at her because she was talking about him. She looked up and they caught eyes in that moment. She smiled. Mr. Nailing, he nodded in agreement. For the first time since Lee had boarded that train, his shoulders relaxed. The prayer ended and Mr. Nailing said 3 words. He said this, say, "Dig in, son." Son. They sat there in that moment just thinking about that word. And something inside him began to change. All that anger, all that fear, all the plans of running away started to fade. And after breakfast, Lee needed a haircut. So Mr. Nailing, We took them to town to get a haircut. They're walking by 6 houses. You see the neighbors, 6 different houses. And 6 different times, Mr. Nailing introduced Lee as, it's our new son. They didn't know where his father was anymore. He didn't know if he could ever find him again or even write him. But that morning, something settled deep inside his heart. And he realized he had just found a home, that he had found a family. In a way, he also not just found family, but he found a father, not one, but 2. A father at the table with him in Texas and a father in heaven who he could talk to anytime. That's what it means to live as God's child. It means knowing that right now you are loved by your Maker. Not because you finally got your life together. Not because you succeeded. Not even because you apologized 100 times. But simply because He wants to be your Father. All the striving for His affection, unnecessary. All the fear of losing that affection, needless. You cannot make Him want you anymore, and you cannot convince Him to abandon you. Because when God adopts you into His family, that adoption is irreversible. You have been placed in His family. You have a seat at that table. And you will always be able to hear the words in your heart that you've been longing for. Dig in, son. Dig in, daughter. The cross proves that you have already been. Because the greatest generosity in history was Jesus giving His life for you. And when you understand that kind of generosity, you can't live close-handed anymore. You start living open-handed. Because the love that saved you now flows through you.